Bitcoin is trading around $87,000 at the time of recording, and I kind of want to touch on what I think is going to happen this week going into Thanksgiving and my bullish price targets for Bitcoin and a specific few altcoins going into year's end. Now, if you're not already, make sure you subscribe, turn on your bell notifications. Everything I say here is very time sensitive. Now, obviously we have some nice tailwinds going on for us. We have pretty much a guaranteed bet that we're going to have a Fed interest rate cut. We have a new Fed chair, which is looking to be Hassett, he's basically the guy that is in Trump's corner. He wants to basically send interest rates to zero. He wants to print money, and that's going to naturally drive a lot of inflation, but we're going to have a lot of growth. And so that's going to be very attractive for risk on assets like crypto, real estate, gold, all that kind of stuff. And so that's going to have a very bullish outlook because when it comes to markets, they price everything in about 6 months in advance. And I think if that's a lock, so to speak, the markets are going to sniff this out and they're going to be pretty bullish. There was also a massive bailout yesterday with artificial intelligence. Obviously, there's a lot of speculation whether we're in an AI bubble, specifically with like NVIDIA, Google, all that kind of stuff. And Amazon announced that they were going to be basically allocating about $50 billion towards artificial intelligence. And that in my opinion kind of solidifies the sort of runway when it comes to the growth of artificial intelligence, because the United States, they can't afford to lose the race, frankly speaking, against like China or any other government for that matter, because we all know that in the future, AI is going to be very deflationary. It's going to create a lot of opportunity, and it's just taking over left and right with whichever way you kind of want to look at things. And so naturally, when you look at things like that, obviously it's like the tech sector. And so, Bitcoin stands to gain the most, in my opinion, just because of how small of a market cap the whole crypto market is. Not to mention that whenever these things start to kind of, go up higher and they're looking more attractive, retail loves to FOMO back into the markets whenever things are going up. So it's just kind of funny how, recently we've had about 4 weeks of just straight downside when it comes to Bitcoin. Altcoins are down like 50%. And it's going to be very funny whenever the market does turn around because retail people, they kind of wait for some sort of confirmation, and so they end up buying like 20 or 30% higher. And then it's just kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy where, everybody's like FOMO buying, the Wall Street, like ETF buyers are all buying back in. Obviously the market makers know this. So just how they were kind of, pushing price down, feeding off of the fear, I think that there's going to be some sort of FOMO rally going into year's end. That's always been my base case. And so I think that that's going to give a lot of gasoline to this sort of fire, if you will, that is Bitcoin and crypto. So my year-end targets is basically, I think that, we have some key levels we need to look at. The bulls really need to step in and start, making a push because we're running out of time, frankly speaking. So I think that if Bitcoin can capture about the $98,000 to $102,000 range, I think that would be a very pivotal moment. And I think that the move up is going to be very violent. Obviously, we've been seeing like a kind of like a, stairs on the way up, elevator down in terms of price action, which has been very bearish. I think that we may see that in the inverse just because there's so much built up leverage when it comes to these short positions that are basically betting that the price is going to go down. And so whenever you see this sort of narrative and trend switch, you'll notice that it's going to, one, pressure these people to take profits on their shorts, or it's just going to liquidate them on the way up. And so that typically creates a cascading effect towards the upside. Now, I think that, again, we need to reclaim certain levels. So, 98, 103 for Bitcoin. I think if we can do that, we're pretty much going to go, at least in my opinion, to some sort of lower high, maybe between like 106 to 110. And if, some way we can do that before year's end, then I think it's a pretty sure bet that we're going to go towards all-time highs and potentially even higher going into Q1 of next year. Now, obviously for altcoins, and this is the way that I'm playing it because I've already allocated most of my portfolio in Bitcoin and I've actually taken some profits into Bitcoin. So I'm pretty Bitcoin heavy. I have accumulated a little bit more Solana and Ethereum just because I think that they're going to stand to gain the most on this bullish run up. And so my whole thesis is, if Bitcoin's going to capture basically like a 30 to 40% move on the upside, then you can pretty much imagine that Ethereum and Solana are going to outpace that. And so I'm basically looking at a way to make more money on the short term. And my plan is still to kind of get out whenever, we see a little bit of a sign of euphoria. And so I think that, if Bitcoin goes back to all-time high, I don't see why Solana couldn't take out. It's like $280 to about $300 range, maybe even higher. And same with Ethereum. I think that, Ethereum has a lot of work to do. But if we can get anywhere close to its all-time high, which is not going to be out of the realm of possibility, assuming that Bitcoin hits its all-time high, I do think that Ethereum needs to put in some sort of violent move higher. So usually what ends up happening with Ethereum is you never really see it break its all-time high just by a little bit. Same with Solana, right? Last cycle Solana was about 250. This cycle it hit about 300. Ethereum barely hit all-time high by I think like 100 or $200. And so I do think that every cycle needs some sort of euphoria. Now, you can make the case that this cycle has been completely different because of where we are in a monetary system, like, quantitative tightening. But again, starting December, we're going to go into this, sort of quantitative easing sort of cycle. And that's not going to happen right away, but the markets are going to kind of sniff this out, and I think they're going to price everything in, and I think they're going to front run the move a lot higher. And so, even if the cycle is going to end, sooner rather than later, again, we just don't have much time. And so I think that we still may see this sort of euphoric phase. And so, I'm still kind of betting on a $6,000 to $8,000 Ethereum. I'm still betting on a $400 to $500 Solana. And then ideally, if those prices hit, I think that puts Bitcoin somewhere in the $150,000 to about $170,000 range. And that's kind of that's my bullish case. If you guys want me to make a bearish case, then drop them in the comments and I will do that. But yeah, just wanted to update you guys with what I'm seeing in the markets. I'm wondering how you guys are trading it, how you guys are feeling. I know that there's a lot of emotions kind of running wild right now with, no shortage of this crazy news. So with that being said, make sure you're subscribed, turn on your bell notifications. I will see you all next time. Bye.